Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
After Mama got sick, Daddy didn't act the same. He'd go off into their room and not come out for days. I was just 13 at that time, but Daddy said I was big and needed to take care of things. I liked feeling responsible. Back then, it was just me, Sarah Beth, and baby Junie, and Junie wasn't much more than 9 months old. She still wanted the teat, but with Mama come sick and all since Junie was born, she had to suckle on one of the mama pigs we had left. We called her Kicker, 'cause she would always try to kick baby Junie away when she would try to drink, but after a while, Kicker got used to it and would show off her pink belly as soon as she saw Junie come round. Maybe even thought that Junie was her own piglet, since Kicker's litter was so small that year. Once, Sarah Beth tried to drink some of Kicker's milk too. She said it was sour, so I never had none of it. We lived on a modest hog farm out in the middle of nowhere, with not much more than a winter barn for the pigs and a rickety house turned all gray from the sun. The ground wasn't good for plowing, but Daddy had tried up until all the grass died out and the trees started to shrivel. We never saw nobody neither, but Daddy told us there used to be a lot of people living out that ways before we were born. Me and Sarah Beth would run around the farm, naming all the pigs and smacking them into something fierce. They would howl and squeal. Daddy didn't like that, though. He took out his gun once. When we started having to take care of baby Junie, we would bring her into the pig pen too. She was too little to talk, but we would ask her to say their names. "That one's named Big Ed, Junie," we said. "Can you say Big Ed?" we said. Sarah Beth always tried to name one America, but I always told her that you can't rightly name a pig something like that lest you were just asking for someone to get confused. Then Sarah Beth would oink like a sure hog and we would fall in the mud and laugh our cheeks red. She looked just like Mama when she smiled, right down to the gums. Most of the time, life on the farm was pretty easy, I'd say. Every morning at the crack of dawn, me and Sarah Beth would go down and put some more wood on the stove, so the house would stay nice and warm. That's the way Mama liked it, Daddy would say. We'd eat something small and watch the fire crackle in the potbelly, the hungry tongues lapping across the grain like a horse on a salt block. Then we would go get baby Junie and take her down to get her milk. She would always squint and grin up to her nose at the sun when we walked out. She would clap her hand on her belly and laugh when we played with her special arm. It was smaller than the other one and didn't work too right neither. Even though Daddy said that baby Junie didn't have to drink milk no more, we would still take her to kick her. It was fun to get her used to all the pigs since there wasn't much else to do, but Daddy insisted we started giving her solid food. So we'd soften up some bread and water and pop it into Junie's mouth. I thought she wouldn't be too happy with it, but she always ate her plate empty. When we got done eating, we'd go out and water all the pigs from some old pump Daddy said his daddy had dug down. You'd have to wait for the mud to clear from it before you could put your bucket under, or else you'd have to make more trips to get good drinking water. That's what I hated. Having to walk back and forth between to the pump and the pig pen was always my least favorite part. After a while, the pump stopped giving so much water, though, and I didn't have to walk so much. That was nice, but a couple of the pigs died. Sarah Beth cried for a whole day. Most of our chores were keeping care of the pigs, so once that was done, me and Sarah Beth could do whatever we wanted until dinner. I always liked playing inside, and was good at convincing Sarah Beth to play what I wanted. "Go hide and I'll count," I'd say, and she would swing her little legs as fast as she could get away. One day I thought I heard her go out the front door, and I had told her that was against the rules. "Sarah Beth!" I yelled, "you better not be cheating." I heard a girl scream, and I thought that maybe she had tripped or something, so I ran out to go find her. I searched forever looking for her, in the barn and in all the pens. Even though Daddy had told me not to, I started checking around the woods. Just as I thought about giving up, I found another one of the pigs outside its pen. Something had cut into it good. It didn't have a head, and all its insides were on the outside in a ring of innards around the corpse like a Christmas wreath around a ham. I went back in the house to tell Daddy like he said I should. When I walked in, I saw Daddy carrying Sarah Beth out of Mama's room. She was bawling and crying her little eyes out, and Daddy gave her several whoops on the face with a tattered boot for going in there. He put her in the basement for a little while to learn her a lesson. I told Daddy about the pig when he got done locking the door. "Another one of the pigs got out," I told him. "It did?" "Yeah, something really got into it, Daddy. Pulled its insides all around." "It will be gone in the morning, honey. But thanks for telling me. That's why you're my big girl." I loved Daddy back then. "How long is Sarah Beth going to be down there this time?" "Long time. She never learned like you did, baby girl." "She just misses Mama, I think." "We all miss Mama." "Is she feeling any better, Daddy?" "You know not to ask about Mama, baby girl." There was another shriek coming from outside. Daddy sighed and unlocked the basement. "How about you get Junie?" I didn't like the basement. I learned Daddy's lessons early, so I wouldn't have to go down there. "It's dark down there, Daddy. Can I stay up here with you?" I remember smelling something right foul come off his chest and from the cracked door to his room. "Go get your sister," he snapped. So I did, and me, Sarah Beth, and baby Junie stayed in the basement until Daddy said it was all right to come on back out. While we were down there, I could hear Sarah Beth still sniffling and whining. "Why you gotta do stuff like that, Sarah Beth? Stuff that Daddy tells you not to do." "I saw Mama. She looked like a scarecrow." I really wanted to ask. Not for me, but for Junie. I was real worried that she would never get to know her mother, but Daddy said to never ask about Mama, so that's what I did. "That's why Daddy licks you. He says you never learn your lessons." I could hear her wipe her nose on her sundress. "Maybe." We heard more screaming from upstairs, heard something bust on the floor, heard Daddy curse. Lasted for a couple hours. There was always a lot of commotion when we went into the basement, and baby Junie started crying up a storm. I had to tell Sarah Beth not to hold the baby's mouth shut because she couldn't breathe. We didn't like when Junie started crying because it took her a long time to stop. "She's probably hungry," I said. I popped my finger in our baby's mouth, and she pecked on it trying for some milk. "She thinks it's Kicker," I tried to tell Sarah Beth, but she wasn't paying attention. She walked along the wall, running her fingers against the shelves of mason jars. You couldn't tell because of how dark it was, but Daddy kept a lot of preserves down there. Fruit, like canned pears and peaches and apples. Some tomatoes and onions, too. There were also stacks of tubs filled with beans and rice lining the walls, but mice had done chewed into a couple of those. They even got into Dougie's old box of toys, and I always wondered what they needed with a bunch of dusty tractors and things. Dougie didn't need them anymore, I guess. Daddy said he wouldn't be coming back. The preserves were safe, though, and sometimes I'd go into the basement, looking at their different colors and thinking about what they tasted like. I liked knowing most of the jars were still full. When Daddy let us out of the basement, it was already almost daytime, and he said he would take care of our chores that day. When he tucked me into bed, he had already bandaged a couple wounds on his arms and hands. He had a black eye. "They hurt, Daddy?" "Now don't worry about that, baby. Did Sarah Beth remember to latch the pen today?" I nodded. "Good. You gotta keep an eye on her. She's not careful like you are." Daddy didn't tuck in Sarah Beth that night. I'm not sure she wouldn't have wanted him to, neither. She always got real cold when Daddy beat her, and as soon as he left the room, she was up looking out the window. "Daddy will whoop you again if he sees you up." She didn't say anything for a while, just standing with the morning sun on her face, looking real intent at something. "I just had to know. 'Cause I saw what got to that pig last. It looked just like Mama." "Don't tell lies, Sarah Beth. I know what I seen." Recently, she was always making up those kinds of stories. I went to sleep without saying another word. The next morning, I noticed that Junie didn't look too good. She turned real pale and didn't want to eat. I tried to ask Daddy what we should do, but he was in his room taking care of Mama and said that he was busy. All the chores were already done, and Sarah Beth was still sore from the day before. She didn't want to play. So me and baby Junie went for a walk, 'cause I thought it might make her feel a little better to get some fresh air and see the pigs. We were walking to the pen when Junie started crying, and she threw up. "It's all right, Junebug," I said, and I'd pat that poor angel on the back. She was as gray as a ghost, but we kept walking. Around the corner of the pen, we could see into Daddy's room. He left the window open that day, probably so Mama could get some fresh air too. It was cool and a nice summer day for that kind of thing. Me and Junie could see Daddy doing something inside, and he'd pop in front of the window now and again. I'd point at him with Junie's special hand and say, "There's Daddy, Junie. What's he doing, Junie?" I'd tell her how hard of a worker Daddy was, and how him and Mama used to dance in the kitchen before she got sick. I told her how Mama used to make pie, how she would mush up the butter and flour in a bowl, how she would can her own fillings, how she would always let me and Sarah Beth lick the spoon when she got done smoothing out the fruit. I told her how Daddy said to not get into any of the cans, so Mama would have something to bake with when she got better. Junie didn't seem like she cared all that much, though. She just closed her little blue eyes and went right to a nap. There wasn't much to do with the pigs since Junie was asleep, so I went and got a blanket from the house and put it into one of the troughs to make a little crib. I laid her down, and she looked just like baby Jesus from the picture books. A couple of the pigs came by and snorted at her real gentle-like, and I was sure she'd feel straight as a maple once she got a little rest. Junie was such a sweet little pea, but Daddy didn't seem to take to her that much. I always wondered why. She didn't ever do anything wrong, not like Sarah Beth did. Once I heard Daddy say that it was Junie's fault for making Mama sick. He said that Junie was a bad baby, but I didn't believe that. I always thought that Mama would be real proud of all of us when she got better. Even Sarah Beth. I was kicking rocks into the woods, thinking about all that stuff. Seemed like the forest got closer and closer each year, all those yellow trees bowing down towards the house. Sometimes in the spring they would have leaves the size of your hand, and Daddy used to put them in between the pages of a book and scratch them up with a crayon. When he got done doing that with a bunch of them, he put them all up on the wall. "Trees used to look like that," he'd say. "Used to be full of leaves and flowers." I didn't know what flowers looked like, except what Daddy would draw up for me. He said the world wasn't a place for beautiful things anymore. Said that's why me and Sarah Beth couldn't play in the woods. "That's where all the flowers went, Daddy? The woods?" I'd ask, and he'd always say, "Something like that, baby girl." Just then, I heard Daddy yelling up something awful, and wouldn't you believe it, Sarah Beth done and tried to get into Mama's room again. I walked in the living room just in time to see him lick her across the jaw. Daddy had her by the hair and opened up the Bible that he always kept on the coffee table, its pages falling apart like flakes of yellow paint. He pushed her face right down in the pages like you do with a dog when it has an accident in the house. "God don't like little girls who don't obey, Sarah Beth. Sends them right to hell." He hit her face on the good book so rough the glass underneath cracked and splintered all over the tight-knit rug below. "You want to go to hell?" Sarah Beth was trying to not step in any of the glass. "No, Daddy." Her head was already bleeding. "No? They used to kill girls with big old rocks when they were bad. Do you want that?" "No, Daddy." He dragged her to the basement and threw her down the steps. I could hear her gasping for wind when she hit the bottom. Slamming the deadbolt shut, he spun around to me with a fire in his eyes. "What do I always say about Mama's room?" I could see a tooth on top of the broken bits of the table. "To not go in it." He nodded and stormed back to Mama's and him's room. Sarah Beth had what was coming to her, but this time I didn't feel so good about how Daddy handled things. I sat down on the floor, careful not to cut myself, careful not to make a bigger mess, careful not to make a sound. People spitting and hollering always turned me pretty sour, so I just stayed right there thinking about things. The world just feels real small in those moments. Those times when nothing's making a peep. I swear that house got so quiet sometimes you could hear the mice whispering in the walls, and you'd wonder what they were talking about. I don't rightly think mice can talk, though. I wanted my Mama back. Things stayed nice and quiet like that all the way until sundown. Through the window, I could see the golden ribbons of twilight making their way through the trees right to the house. They'd cast these long fingers that clawed along the floor beams as they got closer to disappearing. And for the first time in my life, I kind of wished they'd take me away from the farm. I wasn't too certain that there was anything out there past the forest, though. Daddy said there used to be. I stuck out my toes, catching the last bits of sun on their tips. Sarah Beth had been in the basement for a while. Figured she would be there all night if Daddy wound up falling asleep. So I tiptoed over the glass into the basement door where I could hear Sarah Beth tapping her toes against the wood. Screwing open the deadbolt, I peeked my head in, and the door stopped on its hinges when it bumped into Sarah Beth, who was sitting on the steps. Sarah Beth. Yeah. Better come out. Think Daddy's done gone to sleep now. I sat down beside her. Her cheeks were flushed from crying, and her bleeding mouth had gone and ruined her dress. Why do you gotta do that? Do what Daddy tells you not to. I had to know for sure. I saw Mama, Rosie. She put a hand on my cheek. Out in the woods. I got plumb mad at that. Stop with that. I'm not lying. Mama ain't in her room like Daddy says she is. Liars go to hell, Sarah Beth. I can show you. Sarah Beth shot up like a toad on a hot plate, dragging me along with her. Pieces of her hair were still all matted to her head. I didn't want to follow. I knew I shouldn't. Daddy had said not to look, and I knew that. I knew not to look, but Sarah Beth took me outside, round the corner into the open window. We crouched under the windowsill. She pointed up and over, looking like she was about to cry again. I shouldn't have, but I did. I saw in the room. I saw Daddy sleeping in bed, sleeping with a pig in one of Mama's old dresses. I didn't want to see anymore, but I couldn't stop staring till Sarah Beth yanked me down back under the window. Get down, you were only supposed to peek. She started drumming her toes, real nervous. I was speechless and starting to shake. I could smell copper in my nose, and my head got woozy, especially after we heard the screaming coming from the woods again. Sarah Beth jumped at the sound. I didn't. I felt like my body was full of dust, like I was about to float away. The pig started squealing. She grabbed me at the shoulders. Where's Junie? I couldn't remember. Hey, where is baby June? Another scream ripped through the air. Pigpen, was all I could say, and Sarah Beth started running with me by the hand again. Getting closer to the pen, we could see that some of the hogs were out, and the ones that weren't were trying to climb their way over the fence. Even the nice ones that I had named, ran away from me when we got close, looking at me like I was a jackal. I tried to pull my arm out of Sarah Beth's grip so I could try and corral the spooked pigs, but she held me even tighter. She said we needed to worry about June first. I was worried about June. I was worried about the pigs too, and Sarah Beth and all. I was worried about everyone and everything at that point. I was the responsible one. Whatever had gotten into the pen had managed to open the latch, but by the time we got there it was gone. Some of the pigs were still crawling over each other to get out, though. I went straight to the trough where I had laid our sister. The blanket was still there just as I left it, but June was gone. I stared in shock and disbelief, and I could see Sarah Beth darting her head back and forth from me to the empty manger. Where's Junie? She pleaded, an obvious lump building in her throat. We covered our ears at yet another scream, this time much closer. Closer than I'd ever heard before. It couldn't have been any farther than the other side of the barn. Then we heard another sound, another cry, and even in light of everything else, it was the worst sound I had ever heard. Worse than the sound a pig makes the night before we find him dead outside the pen. Worse than the wails that come from the woods and into our house when we were in the basement. It was Junie, calling for help. She was whimpering real soft. From the other side of the barn. I didn't need to think. If I had taken a moment to think, who knows what would have happened. I threw Sarah Beth in the barn and followed after her, making sure to shut that old wooden door as soft as I could manage. The barn was empty in the growing dark, with concrete floors carpeted with rotten hay for the pigs to sleep on when it got cold. The air was moist and claustrophobic, like a crypt. Holding my breath, we listened as Junie's little peeps made their way along the side of the barn, and I dared to look through 2 warped boards of the door. The pigs were frozen still, staring, hardly even breathing. I saw the arms first, carrying baby June in hands with gray, gangly fingers, laced like the brittle wicker of a basket. The whole bony mass screamed and moved on tiptoes at the ends of its stilted legs, and its chest swelled and shrunk unevenly. Junie stopped crying when she looked over at Kicker. It stopped crying when it looked over at us. I couldn't pull away from its gaze. It was draped in moth-eaten rags, haplessly patched together, and on its head, in a nest of tangled strands of cobwebs that barely passed his hair, lay a crown of chained daisies, just like Daddy used to draw. It reminded me of someone I used to know. Someone who used to kiss my head at night and tell me they loved me. Someone who didn't snarl, with teeth nestling in bleeding gums. Someone who looked like my sister. Someone who never used to scare me. We stayed like that for a long time, neither of us moving a single muscle. I thought at any minute it would... Well, I didn't know what it would do to us, and I never figured out. Because after a while it just walked away. Walked away with baby Junie into the woods that was filling up with the evening mist. I choked back sobs as I fell to my knees. Sarah Beth wrapped her arms around me, skin still taut with goose flesh and all, but I felt safe like that. We both cried real good once we started to hear the pigs snorting again. Our voices bounced off the walls and the tin roof back into our ears, filling the room with the bereavement that Junie deserved. She wasn't coming back. We knew we'd never see our baby sister again. We stayed in the barn for hours, too terrified to wander back into the night. When we ran out of tears, Sarah Beth laid her head down on my lap, looking at me like it was all a bad dream. Did it get Junie? Yeah. She drew up her dress to wipe her nose. Bet that's what got Dougie, too. Maybe. Rose? Sarah Beth unveiled her dirty face from behind her dress. Was it Mama? I said no. Even though Daddy said liars went to hell.
Chilling tales for dark nights.